Well, good morning, everybody. Hey, it's so good to see you today, and we want to take just a minute to welcome everybody who's joining us online this morning. And I've got some great news for some of our people that join us online every week. As you know, if you attend here regularly, we have a couple of churches across the state, but one of them is located in a little village called Notai. And Notai is just outside of Springfield, kind of on your way to the coast. Or not Springfield, but Eugene, on their way to the coast. And we've just had them kind of check in with us every Sunday for that, like the last 4 years, because they're such a small community that they don't have the ability to pay a full-time pastor. And so some of you don't know this fact about me, but this isn't the only church that I offer leadership to. In fact, there are 14 churches across the state that I help provide some governance to, because I oversee a team of people called the Church Health Team that serves our churches all across the state and within our organization. And Notai is one of those churches, and we've just been working with them for the last 4 years, trying to help them find a pastor. But it's kind of hard to get a pastor when you don't have a lot of money to pay. And, pastors, and I'm no exception. I like to get paid. I like it when I get paid. Does anybody like it when you get paid? Okay. And so I'm not the only person, right? And so, but we have some super good news for the people in Notai, because we have just solidified a pastor who is going to be able to come, and he's going to launch a brand new ministry in Notai. And he's going to what he's going to do is he's going to start with the premise of what we refer to as a dinner church. And so once a week on a Thursday or Friday evening, they're going to just host a dinner, invite everybody in the community to come and participate with that dinner. And they'll lead a couple songs and have a little devotional. And so this young man, he pastors another church in the Eugene area. And they have decided as a leadership team that they want to provide leadership to Notai. And so they're going to do what we refer to as a PAC, which is parent-affiliated church. And they're going to PAC Notai and provide the governance for them. And I'm just super excited for them because they have just needed that. And I believe that this is going to be a great move for them. And so we just want to say thank you to Notai that checks in every week with us. And so they're going to continue to do that online with us until the PAC, the parent church, has the ability to provide some Sunday morning services, but it's all going to start with a midweek dinner service. And I just think that's just a terrific idea. Come on, let's give Jesus a great big hand, right? So today, if you're visiting with us and you haven't done this yet, I want to just encourage you to just text the word follow to this phone number right here, 541-262-0269. And when you do that, we'll send you a link back right away. If you do us a favor and just fill that out, put your information in, complete the digital connection card. What that does is that gives you an opportunity to connect directly with me and some other team members of the church. But also it gives you an opportunity to just stay apprised of all the events and activities that are going on throughout the week that pertain to all church stuff. And so I just want to encourage you to do that if you haven't done that. Okay, so enough for the commercials. How many are ready to learn something new today? All right. Hey, I want you, if you have your Bibles, I want you to turn to the book of Mark chapter 10. We're almost completed with a series that we've just simply entitled this right here. Come on, I want you to say this with me. It's the challenge to follow. Come on, say that with me. The challenge to follow. And what we've been doing is talking about this idea of what it means to follow Jesus. And so if you've missed any part of these lessons up until today, I want to just encourage you to go visit our website at relevantchurch.org. And right there is a link with what we refer to as Bible therapy. Okay. And so you can just click on that and you can go back and watch the previous lessons. But what we've been doing is we've been talking about what it means to follow Jesus, which is way different than simply identifying as a Christian. Hello? How many of you learned there's some differences? In fact, I would say that a good portion of our country identifies as a Christian, but I would also say that the majority of those people aren't what the Bible would refer to as Jesus followers, because there's a big difference between being a follower of Jesus and simply identifying as a Christian. And all of us are at different stages within our faith journey of this following process. And how many of you discovered that there's some challenges along your faith journey? Come on, raise your hands. You got some challenges with your faith, and I do too. And so if you grew up in church, you know, a lot of this stuff might be a little easier for you because you developed some habits and some disciplines as perhaps a child or a young adult or a young person, and you've been at this for a little while and you're a little further along. But for some of you, you're brand new at this process. And so you've discovered that that following Jesus may have some challenges for you, and you're faced with some choices of some rights and wrongs and some do's and don'ts and some rules and some commandments and some things like that, and you're not sure where all that lines up. And the belief process is sometimes challenging. And so one of the things that we've said from the very beginning of this series is that you don't have to believe everything about Jesus to begin following Jesus. In fact, when we take a look at the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, where's the story of Jesus and where he recruited his disciples and the apostles went out from there, what we discover is that when you read that story with careful attention, that all of his original followers, every single one of them, they had their unbelief in Jesus right up until Jesus actually resurrected from the dead, and then everything changed for them. So there are different phases, if you will, of this following process. So whenever we hear the phrase Jesus follower, there's an assumption maybe that we have kind of had throughout this series and we haven't really talked too much about, and it's this, that Jesus is actually someone worth following. Okay, so when we talk about being a Jesus follower, I'll just be frank with you. I just think that this is almost like goes without saying. But because I've made this assumption, I think it's important to draw a little attention to it because I just want you to know that Jesus is worth following. Okay, despite all the challenges, despite all the things that you're dealing with, all the old lifestyle of habit that you're trying to give up and the new styles of life that you're trying to live. Because here's the thing, when we typically think about Jesus, we typically think about Jesus within a religious context, right? I mean, maybe our mind goes back to the Renaissance days or something like that, where Jesus is always on a cross and he's got these sad eyes, and you know, and we always think of it in terms of Jesus in terms of a religious context, but we never. It's unusual for us to think of him in terms of a leadership context. And some of you are like, yeah, I never thought about that one before, okay? Because here's the thing, is that leaders are actually all about the future, where religion is always about the past. Leadership is always about changing things, but religion is all about keeping things the same, right? And so typically we don't align religion and leadership together. And yet Jesus, when you read the Bible, he was an amazing leader, okay? And in fact, he brought huge changes to a religion that was super steeped into tradition and maintaining all of their little systems and their rules and their programs, okay? And yet there's absolutely no way that you and I would even be here today, 2,000 some years later since Jesus, if Jesus was not an amazing leader. Put that into context a little bit, okay? In fact, one author, I love this quote. I don't know who came up with it, so, but I love this quote here. That somebody said, Jesus built his brand, okay, quote unquote, his brand, in 3.5 years, has hundreds of thousands of franchises, talking about churches all around the world, and his business is still going strong after 2,000 years. All that by rarely leaving an area approximately 180 square miles. That kind of puts some things into perspective a little bit when we think about Jesus in terms of leadership, doesn't it? Okay, and so when we think about this and compare it with our own lives, the reality of it is that Jesus accomplished way more in 3.5 years than perhaps any of us will do in our entire lifetime. Because 2,000 years from now, from today, I highly doubt that anybody's going to remember any of our names. Okay, just a thought. Okay, so Mark chapter 10, we're going to be in that text today. And today what we're going to do is we're going to read a little bit about Jesus' leadership model and what he wants to lay out for his team, if you will. Okay, he wants to lay out a pattern for all of his followers, not just his apostles or his disciples, but for all of us. Okay, so if you're a Jesus follower and you are ever in a position of authority, or you have gained some power and where you lead or demonstrate authority over other people, today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how Jesus expects you and how he expects me to lead. Okay? Now, all of his guys, except for one of his apostles, they actually all became great leaders except one. Okay, we talked about that guy here a week or so ago, and but here's the thing: Mark, who wrote the Gospel of Mark, actually was not one of Jesus' apostles. Okay, and that may be a surprise to you. In fact, he was a close friend of Peter's, and we believe that Mark's Gospel was basically a derivative of his relationship with Peter. And Peter kind of translating and transliterating, if you will, all this information to Mark, and Mark journaled all this stuff down. Okay, that's kind of how we think, because Peter was an eyewitness to all this stuff that happened in Jesus' day, but Mark was not one of the apostles. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to really read about Mark's account, who we believe got his information from Peter, who was there as an eyewitness. So today we're going to start in Mark chapter 10 and verse 32. And here's what verse 32 says. Jesus starts out, and taking the 12 disciples aside, Jesus once more began to describe everything that was about to happen to him. Now let's just stop right here, because if you've been here the last couple of weeks, we've talked about what Jesus is preparing his disciples for. And he's saying, look, guys, you know, things are getting rough. They're going to get tough for you, because up until now, life has been actually pretty good for the disciples. They've not really encountered a whole lot of challenges. There's not a lot of pushback. They've seen Jesus feed people, which means that they were well fed. Okay. They've seen Jesus do some miraculous things, and there's been no resistance. But Jesus has said to them in multiple occasions, in a little while, things are going to become more and more challenging for you to follow. Okay? And so here's what Jesus says. He says, listen, he said, we're going up to Jerusalem, where the Son of Man, and he's talking about himself here, is going to be betrayed to the leading priests and the teachers of the religious law. In other words, these guys, they had all seen how these guys were going to be arrested. They had tried to come and arrest Jesus in the past, but up until now, they've seen Jesus kind of slip away in the crowds. They've kind of seen Jesus avoid any of this kind of conflict. But now, in spite of the fact that he's had some success with that, now things are going to get a little bit hairy. Things are going to get a little different. And so Jesus is forewarning him, and he goes on to give him some details. And here's what he says. He says, they're going to sentence him, talking about himself, the Son of Man, they're going to sentence him to die, and they're going to hand him over to the Romans. And then here's Jesus, he's getting really graphic. And he says, guys, you just need to know, they're going to mock him, they're going to spit on him, they're going to flog him with a whip, and eventually they're going to kill him. But after 3 days, he's going to rise. Now, just as Jesus is saying this, in this, he's trying to pour out his heart. This tender moment. He's trying to kind of portray to the disciples what is yet to come. A couple of them kind of pull Jesus aside. And they have just totally missed the whole opportunity here. And so the next scripture says that then, as in right then and there, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, they came over and they spoke to Jesus. He said, "Teacher, we want you to do us a favor." Now, get the picture. Jesus has just poured out his heart. Hey, they're gonna flog me, they're gonna mock me, they're gonna whip me, they're gonna eventually kill me. Things are gonna get really tough. Oh, hold on, Jesus. We before you go on any further, we got a question. I imagine Jesus is probably going, really? Like right now? Really? Right now you want to ask this question? Well, yeah. Jesus, sorry. Man, we're really sorry about that spitting and that mocking thing and the whole flogging thing. And we're sorry that you're going to die, but can you do something for us before all that happens? So that's kind of the picture. And Jesus, because he's so gracious, aren't you glad that God's grace is good? Because Jesus is so gracious, he says to them, he says, "Well, what's your request?" So they pipe right up. "Well, Jesus, when you sit on your glorious throne, we want to sit in places of honor next to you. One on your right and the other on your left." Now, Jesus, after all this spitting stuff, after all the mocking stuff, after all the death stuff, when you arrive at your kingdom, can we sit right next to you? Now, as we discussed a little bit last week, the disciples here in this moment, their biggest concern is not about Jesus. Their biggest concern is about themselves. You getting the picture? And in other words, Jesus, we know that we can't be king, but we know you're going to be king. So can we be the guy on your left hand and your right hand? Can we be like the number 2 guys in your kingdom? Can we exercise some authority and some power with you? Can we demonstrate that? So their biggest motive right now really isn't what's going to happen to Jesus. It's all about what's going to happen to them. And as we described last week, that's what we refer to as a consumer. A consumer. What's in it for me, Jesus? Jesus, I'm willing to follow you, but what is in it for me? And so James and John, what they're trying to do is kind of edge the other guys out in this moment, but Jesus tells them that they're not ready for that. And so in verse 41, Jesus goes on and he says, when the 10 other disciples, or Mark goes on, he says, when the 10 other disciples heard what James and John had asked, they were, what's the word? Indignant. And now there's some modern day words that we could probably put in here that would describe this a little bit better, but we're going to go with this. They were mad. They were ticked off. I mean, these guys are like, you have got to be kidding me. Now, here's what I want you to understand. The other disciples, they're not indignant because James and John were being insensitive to Jesus. They were upset because they wanted that same privilege. But the problem was that James and John had just kind of beat them to the punch. So the next thing that you know, the disciples, they're fighting, they're arguing, they're bickering back and forth. They got this thing going on, all about what's going to happen when Jesus becomes king. And so Jesus realizes that these guys, that they're still just not getting everything that Jesus is trying to lay down. And so he calls a timeout, and he describes what leadership is all about in the kingdom of heaven. And here's where we're going to get to our topic today. So Jesus, he called them together and said, guys, let's use a modern day illustration. Basically, he says, you know that the rulers in this world, that how they lord it over their people, and the officials, they flaunt their authority over those who are under them. You know all about that, right, guys? And they're like, yeah, we get it. Now here Jesus, he's using 2 different phrases, lord it over and flaunt their authority. And he's using these 2 different phrases, and to really understand what Jesus is talking about, you kind of have to go back to the original language. And if you interpret that in the Greek, these two phrases, to lord it over and flaunt their authority, really mean the same thing. Okay, and he's saying, guys, you know how leadership works in this world, don't you? Oh, yeah. We get it. That if you're a leader, that you're going to lord it over people, that you're going to leverage your power and your authority, not for the people, but for yourself. You understand all that, right? Yes. That everybody who's beneath you, their job is to serve the leader, right? Yeah, we get that. Okay, so Jesus is using these two phrases, to lord it over and flaunt their authority, as an implication of an abuse of authority or an abuse of power. So in our world, it might look a little something like this right here, where the leader sits on top, and then directly underneath the leader, he's got a couple of managers. And then directly under the managers, there's might be a couple department heads, a few 5 or 6 department heads. And then everybody underneath is people like you and I, we're the grunts, right? Okay. So that's kind of how what Jesus is talking about, what was happening in their day. Okay. And so the challenge is that ultimately everybody towards the bottom serves upwards. That's how Jesus describes our culture. And so, of course, our goal is to do what? To move up a notch, right? Because honestly, it's pretty tough being at the bottom, because everything rolls which way? Downhill. Okay? And so everything falls downhill. And so Jesus is saying, look, we understand that this is what it's like in the real world. Okay? And but here's the thing. When Jesus talks about this to their disciples, in their mind, they're thinking, yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to get right up to the top. Or maybe Jesus could sit there, but maybe just one rung below the ladder of Jesus. Because we want to lord over lots of people. We don't want to be the ones ruled over. That would be difficult. We want to be the rulers. So Jesus, we know that we can't be the big bird on top, but maybe we could sit right next to you. Okay? And that's why they wanted to sit on his left and his right. So this is the image that the disciples had. Okay, but check out what Jesus says in this very next verse. He says, but among you it will be, what's the word? Come on, say this with me. Among you it will be different. Among you, it's going to be different. In other words, guys, you know how it is in this culture. You know how it is in this environment, how your boss acts like a jerk, and you work for him. But that's not how I want you to behave if you ever become the boss. Things are going to be different for my followers. And then Jesus turns this whole thing upside down, and he says this in verse 43 and 44. He says, whoever wants to be what's the word? Come on, what's the word? A leader. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must first be and whoever wants to be first among you must be the what? Of how many? Everybody. In other words, Jesus is asking the question, do you want to be boss? Well, of course we want to be boss, Jesus. You want a promotion? Yep, we want one of those. Would you like to be in charge? Of course we want to be in charge. You bet we do. Now, in the church world, because, we don't really have bosses, I suppose. But in the church world, it might be like this. You want to be pastor? You want to be an elder? You want to be a deacon? You want to serve on the finance team? You want to be a team leader? Okay, that's how it might look in the church world. Okay, do you want to have authority and great responsibility? That's what Jesus is asking. Jesus says that is a wonderful thing to desire. But the requirement is that you got to be everybody else's servant. The requirement is you got to be everybody else's slave. That's where it begins. Now, when we read this, our inclination is to say, well, Jesus, that right there, that's never going to work. How does anything ever get done? How does this stuff get accomplished? If the guy at the top is supposed to serve everybody at the bottom, that's not even healthy the way that works. Jesus, this doesn't make any sense. Now, it might work in a religious context, okay, but that's not the real world. But here's the thing, okay, and this is the part that all of us, if you want to be a Jesus follower, here's the things you need to understand. If you want to be a Jesus follower, that is not just give him some attention on Sunday morning when you get out of bed on time and you decide not to go to brunch. Okay, if you really want to be a Jesus follower, part of your responsibility, part of my response, part of your responsibility, part of our responsibility as a church is to lead like Jesus led. Okay? Where instead of lording over people, we learn to serve. Now, to clarify something here, what Jesus is not teaching is an idea of passive leadership, where meaning that leaders fail to lead or give instructions. And he's not saying that the leader and the person in charge should not make decisions. And he's not saying that we should negate responsibilities or production just because somebody has a need, an immediate kind of a thing. He's not talking about passive leadership. And the reason we know this is because Jesus gave instructions. Jesus appointed leaders. Jesus called shots. Jesus did everything that was extremely productive. But instead, what Jesus is talking about in this context is the idea that all of us are to leverage our power and authority for the benefit of those that we oversee. Do you see the difference? Instead of lording, what we're saying is, how can I use my power? How can I use my authority for the people that I serve? How can I use it for their benefit? And so really, this applies to our home life. It applies to your parent life. It applies to your work. It applies in our community, whether you're a coach, whether you're a teacher, whether you oversee a club or some kind of a thing where there's other people involved. Okay, if you're the boss in your business, or maybe you are the president of an HOA, okay, no matter what it is, okay, wherever you have been given an ounce of authority, the truth is that we all know what this is like, don't we? We're people who lord over others, and yet on the opposite is true as well, is that you know what this is like when people leverage their authority for the benefit of others, because it just creates this sense of harmony and unity. It creates a much better environment and atmosphere to be a part of when leaders leverage our power and authority for the benefit of others. And here's the reason why it works. Is because when we believe that they are all about them, then I better watch out for... Hello? I mean, this is true, isn't it? That when we believe that all they care about is theirs, well then, boy, I better watch out for mine because I got to get me some too. Okay? And we know what that's all about. The problem is that when everybody is watching out for themselves, no one has each other's back. But I want you to imagine with me, and Jesus is asking this question. He wants you to just dream for a minute. He wants you to think about this for a minute, about what it would be like in a culture, in our home life, in our workplace, where you knew that they are all about you. Therefore, we could watch out for each other. That's why this works, what Jesus is talking about. So here's the thing. As we wrap this up today, and we kind of move towards our conclusion, if you're serious about wanting to be a Jesus follower, I just want to give you a question that has helped me navigate this whole concept in ministry and life. And I'm not perfect at it, but it's helped me. And I believe that it will help you in your organization. I believe it'll help you in your workplace, in your family, in your marriage. I believe it'll help you in your home life. Okay, I believe that it'll help you in your workplace, wherever it is. If you have a little bit of authority, if you govern over others, if you lead other people, okay, I want to give you a question that will help you lead like Jesus led. And the question is so simple. And here's what I want to encourage you to do. Just ask the question. Is there anything I can do for you? That's where it begins. Is there anything that I can do for you? This is a question, honestly, that has changed my perspective of ministry. And I'll just tell you, I don't get it right all the time. I don't get it right. But here's the thing, is that when you ask this question, what you're doing is you're asking another individual, how can I loan you me for the benefit of you? How can I bring my resources, my talents, my strengths, my authority, my power, my position to help you? How can I help you? And asking this question, honestly, it just lets people know that you care about them. Now, here's the thing, is that if they don't need your help, that's fine. But at least they know that you're willing. Now, the reality of it is that this idea of asking, is there anything that I can do for you? Isn't this like the whole premise of the Bible? Because isn't this what God has done for us? Think about this. God looked down on our sinful world. He looked down on your sinfulness, on my sinfulness, on all of my weaknesses, on all of your weaknesses, all of the shortcomings that you had, your brokenness. God looked down on our broken world and he just asked the question, is there anything I could do to help? Because he knows that we cannot fix our own problems. Because we're a mess. We need help. And so God says, is there anything that I can do for you? What can I do to help you? Now, for some of you, if you were to walk into your job tomorrow and your boss asked this question, is there anything I can do for you? You would literally just fall right out of your chair. Okay? Because you happen to work in an environment where your boss, he never asked this question. Why? Because you are supposed to ask him that question. See, and the reality of it is that there's people that work for you, that if you were to ask them this question, they'd fall out of their chair as well. Because the reality of it is that they believe that they exist for you. That's why they work. And Jesus says, look, this is very simple. We are not to leverage our power and authority for us. Instead, we are to leverage our power and authority for the benefit of other people. And one of the simplest, most easy ways that we can begin to do that very thing is just ask the question, hey, is there anything that I can do for you? Now, here's another practical step that I think that we can take as we talk about this today, is to do for some what you wish you could do for everyone. Now, the reality is Jesus did this all the time as well, because if you read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you'll notice that Jesus, he didn't heal everybody. True? I mean, he didn't feed everybody. There were times he fed big crowds, but he didn't feed everybody. There were times that he didn't go and visit everybody at their house, but he visited some. There were people that tried to stop him in town, and he and he didn't stop for them, but there was others that he was impressed to stop. Okay. But what Jesus did do is he did for some what he wished he could have done for everyone. Because the bottom line is this, is that as we've talked about, we are supposed to leverage our power and authority for the benefit of those that we oversee. Now, I have a friend of mine. He owns a really large electrical company up in the northern part of the state. And one day he just, he talked to his office manager, and he had, I don't know, 4 or 5 ladies working in the office there. And he says, here, I've come up with this idea. And he talked to her manager, and he says, I've come up with this idea. Here's what I want you to do. He says, I want you to schedule a weekend getaway for all of the women in the office. And he says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to Sun River. And if you've never been to Sun River, it's like this really posh kind of place. You can go and get pampered, and it's kind of cool over there in the Central Oregon area. And so it's a little resort area. And he says, I want you to go there. I want you to rent a big old house. I want you to just treat our employees like they're princesses. I want you to give them pedicures. I want you to just all expenses paid, fine dining, whatever they want to do on that weekend, you do it. It's all on the company dime. That'd be pretty nice, wouldn't it? How many of you like to work for that guy? Let me just see your hands, okay? All the women are like, yeah. The men are like, well, pedicures, I'm not sure, but all expenses paid. Now let me just ask you this question. When those women got back to work, how do you think those ladies responded to the company? See, do you think they believed that their boss was in it for himself? Or do you think that they believed that their boss actually had their back? Okay. See, listen, this is the kind of thing that great people do all the time. This is what great leaders do all the time. And this is precisely what Jesus did for people. And it's what Jesus is asking us, his followers, to do for others. And so here's the thing. If you're not a Jesus follower and you just simply identify as a Christian and, you come to church when you don't have, brunch or something else going on, and, you just kind of, it's a casual thing for you. I mean, you believe, but you're not generally following. Listen, there's no criticism from me. That's your choice. Okay. But listen, you have a choice of what all this looks like for you in your life. Okay. If you're just a person who just identifies as a Christian, you can choose what ladder of the rung you want to be on. Okay. But here's the thing that I want you to understand. If you want to be a Jesus follower, you don't have a choice. Hello? Is anybody hearing me today? Because here's a reason why. If we go to the end of Mark's story here, Mark makes an amazing comment that just takes away all of our excuses if we're going to be a Jesus follower. And here's what Mark says in verse 45. He says, for even the Son of Man, talking about Jesus, came not to be what? But to what? And even to give his life as a ransom for many. So here's the thing. If you're a Jesus follower and you think that authority is all about you. My name's Brian. I'm your friend. Here it comes. Are you okay? If you're a Jesus follower and you think that authority is all about you, then what you have really done is you have rated yourself above Jesus. And here's my question for you. Do you really think that you're greater than Jesus? I mean, honestly, is that how you really rate yourself? Because here's the thing. If we don't, then we have no business expecting other people to serve us. We should have no thoughts of that at all, but rather how we should serve them. Because Jesus came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. And it's within this context that Jesus says, and he invites you and I to follow him, to figure out how to leverage your authority, to figure out how to leverage your position and your power, your strengths for the benefit of other people that you oversee. Because here's the thing, you'll be better off. Those people will be better off. Your organization will be better off. Everybody wins whenever we do whatever Jesus did. So here's my final question, and then we're done today. Okay. When we think about all this stuff, think about all the birds at the top and the birds at the bottom, and the view doesn't look too good when you're at the bottom. Hello. Yeah, I mean you're okay. Everything's rolling downhill. When you think about this whole concept of what we're talking about today, I just want to ask you this question. What does that look like in your world? What would it look like in your world to adopt Jesus' model instead of the world's model? What does this look like for you? In your workplace, in your family, in your marriage, in your home life, with your kids? Honestly, you might have a great marriage, but maybe your relationship with your kids is horrible because of this right here. I mean, you thought you had kids to just do whatever you tell them to do. And now they're young adults, and guess what they don't do? Anything that you want. And all the parents said, true. Okay, what would this look like in your world? So the question is, are you a follower worth following? In your world. See, here's what I want you to understand. This topic that we're talking about is so just incredibly convicting for me. And honestly, this is like one of the toughest challenges for me as a pastor. It's a tough, super difficult challenge for me as an individual, because just like your world, my world is exceptionally busy. And when I ask this question, there are times that I ask this question, is there anything I can do for you? And Pastor Brian, sometimes I ask that question and I'm just praying, oh God, please don't help him say yes, there's something I'm just like you. I struggle. There are times that I feel that I don't have the time to serve others. Last night, we had a family in the church who called, said, Pastor Brian, can you pray? We're just sick. And so I prayed for him right then. And I just, without even thinking about today's message, I'm like, well, is there anything else I can do for you? And they piped right back, I'd just love some honey. I would love just some good old-fashioned chicken noodle soup. We were so sick. And I'm like, it's Saturday night. See, we close things down early at our house on Saturday because Sunday is such a busy day. I mean, I only work like 3 hours a week. So it's important that some of you get that dumb joke. It's important that I get a good night's sleep on Saturday, right? And so I'm thinking to myself, oh man, I'm already in my sweatpants. I'm already in my pajamas. I'll be right over. So I went down and got some soup and some stuff and some other things, a little bag of stuff. And I don't say all that to give me kudos. All I'm saying to you is that it is so hard to ask people, is there anything I can do for you? How can I loan me to you? What can I do for you that I wish that I could do for everyone? Because sometimes they take you up on it, and now it's time to be a follower. You with me? Okay. Because if they say, yeah, here's what I need, it just adds work. It just adds a burden. It just adds responsibility. It adds pressure to our already busy schedules. And yet that's precisely what Jesus did for you. It's precisely what he's done for me. And there is no better way to demonstrate that you are a Jesus follower than to ask this question of other people and to do what Jesus did. He couldn't do it for everybody, but he did for a few what he wanted to do for everybody. And that's precisely why we say that it really is a challenge to follow Jesus, isn't it? So I want to pray for you. In fact, I'm just going to invite you to stand to your feet because I want to pray for you, because I think that some of you've heard this story and you're thinking to yourself, well, there's probably a few things that I could correct. I'm kind of a bonehead in my marriage, or I'm kind of I kind of have a wrong perspective in my family and my kids, and at work I'm kind of hard to get along with, and maybe just maybe the Holy Spirit has been kind of maybe poking at you a little bit this morning, and he's just asking you to respond. And so what I want to do is I just want to pray, because I believe that if we can begin to navigate this concept, what can I do for you? And then just simply do for a few what we wish that we could do for everybody. I want you to imagine what this would do in your home life, in your workplace, what this would do for our church across our communities, what this would do for churches around the world. Imagine. The sky's the limit. Infinite options. So Jesus, today, I just pray for all my friends and family who are here today. Lord, I consider every one of them family. Lord, we all love you, and Lord, we all are on different levels of our followership with you, different stretches along our path of faith. And Lord, maybe there's people here today that are saying, yeah, to be honest, I'm kind of a jerk at work, or I'm a jerk in my family, or I'm not a very good spouse, and I demand from other people instead of willing to serve. And God, if you've poked and prodded at us a little bit about this, Lord, we want to be responsive to you. And we're just going to ask for your help today. That's all we're going to do. To just ask you to help us, to change our mindset, to change the principles in our mind. Maybe we were raised that way. Maybe we were just taught that and we just don't know any different. But Jesus, you came along, you taught your disciples how to behave differently. And so Jesus, if we're going to be a follower of you, our desire is to do what you did. And so, Lord, if there's people here today that this applies to, Lord, I just pray you'd help them to change. We'd take these two simple patterns that you've given us, just to ask people what we can do for them and just see where that takes us, and just to be sensitive to other people. Because, God, we love people and we want everybody to come into the kingdom of heaven. That's our goal. So I just pray this blessing on everybody here this morning in your amazing name. If you agree with that prayer, say good amen. Amen. All right. So before we go today, we always end our service with a little 60-second quiz or a little 60-second takeaway. And today I want you to just gather up with 4 or 5 people, and I want you to just answer this question here: is how can you leverage your power and authority for the benefit of people that you oversee? Okay. Now this I want you to. You don't have to be a leader the way that the government says. Lord help us. Okay. But whether you lead, whether you're a parent, whether you're a husband or a spouse or whatever, okay, I want you to just, whatever this applies to, how can you leverage your power and your authority for the benefit of the people that you oversee? Okay, I want you to just take like 60 seconds. I want you to just gather up 4 or 5 people and just quickly answer this. And it might be a real simple answer. Okay, it might be a little more complicated, but you only got 60 seconds, okay? And then before you go today, just redirect your attention up here because I got a couple of really important things that you need to know before you go, okay? God bless you. 60 seconds.
Joining us for Bible Therapy today. We're so glad you're part of our online community. Please like, subscribe, or leave a comment in whatever platform you're watching us from. This action helps us know you're there and helps us expand to other viewers. You can also connect with Pastor Brian and Relevant Church by sending email to reachus@relevantchurch.org or text the word follow to 541-262-0269. We're so glad you joined us today. We hope you will join us again next week. And we also invite you to watch more of Pastor Brian's Bible Therapy sessions on YouTube and connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at Relevant Church, Oregon.